So for me, the compositional process, it happens over a long period of time. So it's sort of more about each individual time that I sit down. I need to sort of center myself and focus on uh, what it is I'm sort of seeking to do with my music and sort of what needs to be accomplished or what can be accomplished in one session. It might be just a session just to fine tune some aspect of a piece of music. Maybe it's just fine tuning the orchestration, or maybe it can be something really big, like I've got a whole idea for a new section and now I need to work out how all the pieces are going to fit together. But in terms of the creative process, all of that has to start with sort of a mental space that can allow me to imagine what it's like to be an audience member hearing this music for the first time, or what it'll be like for the musicians the first time they receive this music as well. That for me is most important. Each day that I come to write music, it sort of gets approached differently. I've started my day maybe perhaps differently, or I've got some other thing to do in the afternoon. So when it comes to finding that time to really focus on writing music, I just need to sort of know how much time I'm going to have and how much I'll be able to realistically work on the music, and that'll allow me at least some space uh, to then do that work. In terms of sort of an underlying interest or thing I value in the music that I write, um, for me, a lot of it has to do with my interest in sort of the psychology of listening to music and interacting with music, which is very related to sort of the emotional response to music. But I like to imagine what is going on in the head of a person who is listening to my music. I like to imagine a sort of conversation, a dialogue between the music that I'm writing and the thought process that somebody listening to the music is experiencing at that time. So I like to craft my music, therefore, in ways that sort of is interesting, surprising, immersive. These are all sorts of things I try to go for as I try to create that dialogue with the audience. So given that my music often deals with sort of my own interest in the psychology of the listener, I'm usually dealing pretty abstractly in terms of story. I'm not trying to necessarily force an audience to sort of hear a particular through line, but at the same time, I know I have this opportunity to sort of to build that sort of connection over time for the audience. So I don't think of it very programmatically. I don't think of it very much in a narrative way, but I do like to think of um, from beginning to end, sort of what is that one little nugget that gets remembered at the end of listening to a piece of music? What is that sort of core essence of what it is that happens? And then from my point of view, how in writing the music, how are the ways that the decisions that I make, how do those then affect what gets remembered and what is important when someone listens to a piece of music of mine? In thinking about music as a language, as a sort of shared language in some ways, sort of shared with the past and shared with sort of our current present, in that, you know, we have these ensembles, for example, the orchestra. When I choose to write for the orchestra, I sort of have this knowledge of what's been done in the past, and I sort of take from that. I can borrow little ideas, little thoughts, that could be an orchestrational thought, or just sort of the use of a particular family within the orchestra. And yeah, I do think of it as me having that sort of conversation with the past history of that music, what has been done with the orchestra before, and then what I am doing now. So often in a single piece of music, I'll have little things that maybe it's just enough that it's in my head, that it's sort of a nod to or in dialogue with some other piece of music that had been written for the same ensemble. But I hope that my sort of knowledge of that relationship can still communicate a little something to the audience, maybe just maybe a fleeting thought of, oh, that sounds like this, or this reminds me of this. And I can start creating these even larger conversations between an audience member and their own history and past with this music. For me, there's multiple points at which a piece gets finished. There's the initial point, which is the first deadline, the first due date that music has to be given to a musician or an ensemble or an administration. And that's an important deadline to reach, but I often find that the music is going to change between that first day that it's given to the ensemble and then the first time that they perform it. Because as soon as music gets rehearsed, there's already changes that are going to be made every single time. And then from that point forward, what you can always hope for and only hope for is a future to continue developing that music, an opportunity for it to get played again. And if you are given that opportunity, you get that chance to tweak things little bits more and more. So I don't think I've quite yet reached a point with any piece where I feel like it is finished, even though, by all accounts, it's been, published or performed that first time. I'm not going to be able to answer that question. I don't have any one particular 10 seconds of music that I think is my favorite or the best. In terms of things I value in my own music and things I try to do, I'm always trying to look at the bigger picture and how am I filling up these large spans of time with sound, and what is interesting about the way I've chosen to do that. So for me, a moment doesn't quite work unless everything that precedes it and that everything that follows it also works. So I usually don't feel like I can distill a piece of music of mine into just one, maybe 10-second clip. I feel like it's all about where we came from and where it feels like we're going. And then that's what can make a section really stand out to me. Of course, I often will really just write for myself. And what that usually will mean for me is just messing around with some audio software, messing around with some idea, maybe taking somebody else's music and just reworking it in a way that is just sort of fun and engaging for me. Often I know there's many reasons that that isn't a product I'm going to put out into the world, but it's something that I can still have fun with and do. And I feel like a lot of the ideas I'll develop in sort of this playful sort of composing that's just for me is I find lots of techniques or materials that I'll then use in the future again in some way or another. It'll make its way into something else I've written. This is an always changing topic for me in terms of what I have with me as I'm writing music. The baseline for me is I've always had a keyboard on my side. I've always had, either a notepad or just my laptop in front of me. And then more and more lately, because I incorporate so many just different electronics in my music, a lot of it is in those softwares, but I've also found myself bringing in, my guitars that, back in high school when I was in a band, of course, I developed a lot of techniques, and I feel like I can use those instruments, those sounds, those ideas as I write music now. So it depends on the piece of music. It'll change just based on what I'm writing and who I'm writing for. But as a baseline, yeah, computer, piano, other instruments, lots of things. in addition to being a composer, I also am an educator. I am currently teaching at the university level. And that, just as a whole, as a career path, is something I also find deeply rewarding and that I've always felt like I would want to pursue. So teaching in some capacity or another, maybe even if it weren't in music, I would still find it to be a career path I'd want to do. That said, my fiance, she's a lawyer. I feel like I'm very good at arguing as well. So, uh, I probably wouldn't like the work of being a lawyer, but I would love just the research and argument aspect that I see in law. I'm very excited about where we are at this moment in contemporary music and where it feels like we can go from here. Which is to say that we have so many new people, voices bringing their ideas to these ensembles like the orchestra. And everyone is sort of having their different dialogues with this ensemble and with this repertoire in their own unique and different ways. And I feel, for me personally, I bring a little bit of my classical training to the orchestra when I write for it, but also my interest in all sorts of other music, in particular electronics and electronic music. Um, I haven't yet combined the orchestra with electronics. I've done it with chamber groups of 15 players, but even if I'm not using electronics and writing for the orchestra, that's going to color the way that I deal with its sounds and with its forces. So just as I find that very interesting for myself, I also find it very interesting to see what everyone else brings to the table when they also write for ensembles such as the orchestra. So from an audience perspective, I also think that means that the audience has so much sort of things to look forward to, so many vibrant new musics that can be made with these ensembles that we already love because of the different perspectives and voices everyone brings to the table. I do feel that many, many more audiences and orchestras have been embracing contemporary music in a way that's really beneficial for both. I'm very fortunate to live in Los Angeles, where we have the LA Phil, which has done great work developing relationships with local composers and local organizations, in addition to keeping a very high standard in their classical repertoire that they perform so well. So I do see it across the nation. It's not only happening just at contemporary music festivals, even though that is a fantastic place for this music to be heard, but it's getting more and more widely accepted at smaller orchestras all the way up to the highest level, which is a great thing to see.